Payten. Susan connected with me some weeks ago and said, would you like to be our speaker on this date? And the theme is, behold beauty everywhere. And I thought, no, I don't behold beauty everywhere. So how am I going to speak to that? I can't actually speak to that because it's not a truth for me. So I sent an email back, and Susan connected with me and said, well, you know, the spiritual leadership thinks it's a good idea to explore that. And would you talk on that? When you don't see beauty, behold beauty in something. Here we are in a spiritual community looking for shared spiritual awakening. We're engaging in authentic relationship with self and others. And so it's important to have a conversation about why I cannot hold that statement. And so I'm thinking, well, okay, what do I call this talk? Well, what do I do? What do we do when we don't behold beauty in everywhere and in everything? And I had a very potent experience. I think around November of 2020, something came to my awareness, a situation in the world that shocked me. And I won't say what it was. If you want to know what it was, please come and speak to me. But the process that I went through, I believe is a process that many people are going through. That people are being awakened and kind of shocked and brought to their knees in their personal lives and in the global community as we see the world that we know shaking apart to be put together anew. And it was like a cork had popped off. Repressed grief, sorrow, anger, and rage. And I cried on and off for 3 days. I could not stop. I couldn't leave the house because I never knew when I was going to be sobbing. I could feel it now. You can hear it in my voice. And I know people whose lives that's happening to them in their lives for different reasons. And I had cultivated a practice of being with some years ago when I went on a 21-day silent retreat and learned to be with what's arising in the moment. And I was the one that had spent my life either repressing and suppressing that which didn't feel comfortable, or trying to run away from it, trying to self-soothe. I became an emotional eater, emotional spender, and I was actually a volunteer holic at one time. I wanted to keep so busy so I couldn't think the thoughts that I didn't want to think and not feel the feelings that I didn't want to feel, that wanted to be felt because they keep pushing to be felt. And so in this time of this deep triggering in me, I recognized that I wanted a resolution of what had arisen. I knew it wanted my attention because it wouldn't let go. And so for those 3 days and nights, I let myself be with what was arising in the feeling of the body, not just what was going on in the mind. It was the feeling in the body, being with the body sensations. And that's what the silent retreat was about. The Vipassana retreat is about being with the feelings arising in the moment, the most prominent feeling. And then when something else arises, you come to that next prominent feeling. And after 3 days, I realized, okay, this is so deep. I realized I wasn't just working from my personal experience. I've been working with the grids of the planet, the global energies for the last 12 years or so. And I recognized that I was feeling into my akash, the grief and the anger of my personal lineage, the culture, and the world. And as I'm pondering, what am I going to do? I just don't know. I don't know how to shift this. And I have a very deep connection with Nose Hill Park. I've done a lot of walking up there. I've done a ceremony with my drum many times up there, and it called me. come be with me. Come be with me. And lay your burdens down. Give me your sorrow. Give me your grief. Lay down your anger, your rage, and your resentment. And so I did. I answered the call of Nose Hill. And the first day I went up there, I found the quietest area of the hill. Some of them were pretty busy. If you've been up there on a busy day with the dogs especially. And all the beautiful people. So I found the quietest place. I remember there was still snow. And I walked, and the first day I sobbed. I sobbed and sobbed, and the earth just took my sobbing. And the air took my sobbing. And the fire in the belly of the earth, and the water and the snow took my grief. And I laid it down for myself, and I laid it down for my lineage, and I laid it down for my world, that which could be laid down through me. And the next day, I had a little temper tantrum up there. I vented, and the earth said, I can handle it. If there was any curse word that I missed out on, I'd be really surprised. And I let that flow. And when I came to other people, which was kind of rare because of the path that I took, I allowed myself to just be present, to honor them. But when they left, I just leaned down. And I could feel the shifting in my body in that day of sobbing. Sobbing till I didn't need to sob anymore. And then being able to rant and rave in a container where I was held by the Blessed Mother, by the Blessed Father, by the above and by the below. As I, with every step, I let myself be present to what was presenting in feelings and words. On the third day, I went up. I was kind of alternating between some grief and some anger, but there had been such a relief, such an outpouring, and such a surrendering, such a giving over through the embodied, very conscious awareness of every step and every feeling and every word. And knowing that I didn't want that staying inside of me. If you've ever had that kind of experience, we know how that suppresses the immune system. What is it? If we have an anger outburst for I don't know how many minutes, it compromises our immune system for hours. So I knew I didn't want that. I didn't want that to continue to be a part of that underlying energy signature. And that is part of how we're then pulsing out into the world. But I also wanted to embrace what was true for me. And in that somatic experience, what's the soma? Let's see, I wrote that down as a definition. Soma means the body as perceived from within. So being very present to what's within us. But I also knew that my experience is my experience of the moment. I know from so many practices, as many of you do here, probably everyone who's in this room, that our experience of the moment shifts and changes. So I knew I wasn't going to be imprisoned by it forever. And part of why I suppressed my grief years ago is because I felt like if I ever let my grief fully be expressed, I'd never get out of it. I felt that if I let my anger be expressed fully in a respectful, boundaried way, respectful of self, other, and property, I was afraid that I would never get out of it and I would get caught up into it. So this recognition of needing this conscious, body-focused experience was very freeing for me. And it created an expanded viewpoint of the situation that had triggered me, because it had roots in my own personal experience and trauma. And it allowed me to have greater access to my divine powers. If you've been here for a while, you heard about the 12 powers that we do our candlelighting service with. These powers of being as divine beings, these powers of faith, will, understanding, strength, love, elimination, life, vitality, etc. And so allowing that process to be consciously and deliberately engaged, free up this restriction that I'd had through that grief and rage. And I was able to get to that place of asking a question. Okay, now that in this house clearing, things have been shaken up to be put together new and realigned. So what is mine to do? Is there anything I'm called to do to take action in the outer world? And for me, there was no action out there that I was actually called to take. Now that might change in a future moment. But the action I was called to take was to consciously and deliberately take that shift in me and pulse that into the world. As a grid worker, I believe that we can influence the grids of this planet, that we are influencing the consciousness of this planet. And I didn't want my suppressed rage and anger and bitterness and this grief that was incapacitating. Right? I couldn't leave the house for 3 days because I just couldn't stop the crying. I did not want that to be what I continued to pulse out into the world. It was my experience. I've learned from it, I've grown from it. I don't know when I'm going to get triggered into something else like that again. Who knows? How many times have you been triggered into something that just came right out of left field? You had no idea. You can be in a grocery store and see something on a shelf that triggers a memory of something. Remember a grief counselor, Dr. Alan Wolfelt, who's been up to Calgary many times doing grief seminars. He said that he calls them grief spurts. He said, I was standing with my daughter in the grocery store one day, and my father had died a few years before, and he said, I'm looking at my father's favorite spaghetti. And he said the tears just started flowing. And he and his child are standing there as he has a grief spurt because he sees his transitioned father's favorite spaghetti. So we never know. So being able to develop this capacity to be with what's presenting. And I know if I get triggered, say here today in something, that it's up to me to be able to kind of put it on pause, the dealing with it. If it's not appropriate for me to be present to it in this experience, then when I put myself into a situation, a container of support that I can then experience it, I can have a date with myself. I can have a date with all of myself. I believe we're multifaceted personalities and multidimensional beings and multifaceted personalities. And so, while I still do not behold beauty everywhere, I do not behold beauty in the violence that's happening in this world. A friend of mine whose daughter was murdered in Calgary in March, stabbed to death on the street. I don't see beauty in that. I don't see beauty in the pedophilia that's going on, in the human trafficking. But what I do see the beauty of is the human spirit and its resiliency. Our capacity to transform that which is limiting, constricting, lower frequency consciousness. There is such beauty in that. And if we were all to share our life story and what brings us to this moment and the challenges that we've had, and how it might have taken decades to get us in this room to where we are now, here we are in a community. What's our vision? Around shared spiritual awakening. And so here we are saying yes to consciously contributing to the expansion of consciousness within our own lives, within our families, our communities, and in our world. And so I choose to have a practice of consciously noticing beauty. You know, the gratitude, you had different words you thankfulness, etc. What do they call it? Filling up your love bucket. Filling up the beauty bucket. There's so much beauty to be had in the moment. As I look around at your faces, I see the beauty. I see the beauty of your spirits. If we go for a walk around this community today, we would see the beauty in the green trees and grass and people walking their dogs and children out with their parents. And there would be so much beauty just within a 5-minute walk here. So right now I'm staying out near Millville with a friend who is here today, Heather Dreger, and the beauty of that homestead and the wildlife that's on there is really helping to fill up my love bucket. And this is all helping, this deliberate evolution of consciousness is helping to shift me and my environment from fear-based living more and more to love-centered living. And so I invite you to notice for yourself, as you've had challenges in your life in the last perhaps month, year, decade, to notice how you choose practices to assist you in filling up your love bucket, your beauty bucket, your support bucket, so that when you are triggered by something in your life, personally or out in the world, that you can be held by the capacities of the powers of your divine beingness, so that they're there for you more and more automatically, that you can be held in the hands of grace and understanding and compassion and equanimity as you are experiencing. So we have the ability, because of the conscious beings that we are, to experience and witness ourselves experiencing. Have you noticed that? As we've done our spiritual awakening, we can see the wounded child or the wounded teenager or the wounded aspects of us, and know that we are held in the container of these divine powers that we have been deliberately cultivating. So let's go on a little meditation as we cultivate this state of grace.
We are held in the hands of grace, forever safe in the arms of love. Like a child receives protection from a mother's warm embrace. We are held in the hands of grace. We are held in the hands of grace, forever safe in the arms of love. Like a child receives protection from a mother's warm embrace. We are held in the hands of grace. We are held in the hands of grace, forever safe in the arms of love. Like a child receives protection from a mother's warm embrace. We are held in the hands of grace.
And here we are, held in the arm, the embrace of grace, of love, of wisdom, compassion, and all other words that come to your awareness. I find myself being rocked embrace of my divinity as I know you are being held in your divinity. Using the breath to come home to self. Self-awareness. Self-acknowledgement. Self-ownership. Self-allowance. As we purposefully cultivate this knowing, this felt, embodied knowing of our truth of being, our divine powers as expressions of divine life. And we hold this supportive container of loving kindness, compassion, sacred equanimity, feeling the truth to the best of our ability in this moment of our holy wholeness. As we allow our wisening as divine beings through the presencing of the very experiences of our life. Allowing ourselves to be our own loving divine mother and father that holds us in unconditional love. Gaining more and more trust that when we are triggered by the circumstances of life, that we have our own container to support us, no matter what. And we feel and know as the body, the mind, the emotions, and our energetic beingness comes into greater and greater harmonization. That we are a contributing force for the evolution of consciousness on this planet. And as we walk through the world, our growing ability to be in authentic ownership of ourselves, witnessing ourselves, processing for ourselves, knowing when to reach out for assistance, knowing what is mine to do from this place of grace. We see and know that who we are makes a difference in this world. And let's send the power of this meditation out into our world, down into the earth, out into the air, knowing that we as a collective are exponentially